The grand hall shimmered under the glow of golden chandeliers, their flames flickering in rhythm with the hushed anticipation of the crowd. Velvet drapes hung heavy, and the scent of polished wood mingled with the faint perfume of lilies placed in crystal vases. The orchestra tuned their instruments, the air trembling with stray notes, sharp, dissonant, yet promising harmony. Among the gathering nobility and curious onlookers, there was a palpable sense that what they were about to witness was not merely a performance, but a revelation of sorrow and beauty, stitched into the fabric of music and movement. As the curtain rose, the stage revealed a moonlit lake, rippling with an otherworldly glow. The dancers emerged, delicate as mist, draped in white feathers, their arms curved like wings. They moved with a precision that transcended human effort, as though they had become swans in spirit. Yet beneath the grace was something else, something mournful. Their eyes seemed to carry secrets, as if the story being told was not only imagined, but carried the weight of truth, of lives cursed and bound. The audience leaned forward, captivated, and in that silence, Tchaikovsky's score rose like a voice from the depths of the earth, calling forth shadows and dreams. In the middle of the swans stood Odette, the Swan Queen. Her presence was fragile yet commanding, the elegance of her movements marked by a sorrow that seemed too real to be feigned. She glided forward, her face pale under the stage light, her arms trembling as though each motion cost her more than strength. It cost her pieces of her soul. The music encircled her, tender and tragic, a melody that could pierce even the coldest heart. Watching her, one could not help but feel that her dance was not just a role but a confession, that behind the feathers and poise lay the eternal suffering of a woman trapped in a fate she did not choose. Prince Siegfried appeared next, stepping from the shadows with the boldness of youth, his costume shimmering with jewels that reflected the artificial moonlight. He gazed at Odette as though seeing her was akin to beholding the dawn after endless night. His steps carried the hunger of a man longing for freedom, for love, for something purer than the world of power and duty he was born into. Each leap, each turn, was filled with desperation, as if reaching her could save him as much as it could save her. The music swelled when their hands finally touched, and the audience could almost hear the unspoken vow between them, a vow of protection, of defiance against the curse that held her captive. Yet, hidden in the corners of the stage, the figure of Rothbart loomed. Cloaked in darkness, his movements sharp and sinister, he embodied the cruel fate that hovered over Odette's fragile wings. His arms cut through the air like talons, and the orchestra answered his presence with violent strings tearing into the serenity of the lake's melody. Rothbart's curse was not merely a spell on Odette and her companions, but a symbol of every shadow that haunts beauty, of every cruelty that binds innocence to suffering. When he extended his arm, the swans trembled, their feathers bristling as though the very air around them had turned to chains. The story unfolded in waves, moments of tenderness colliding with storms of despair. The prince's attempts to rescue Odette were tender, but always Rothbart's shadow interceded, reminding all that love alone could not shatter curses forged in darkness. As the dancers twirled and leaped, the tragedy grew heavier, each sequence more desperate than the last. When Odile, the black swan, appeared, her steps mirrored Odette's but with a cruel brilliance, her eyes glittering with the deception that would undo the prince's oath. The orchestra's tempo quickened, strings racing like a heart betraying itself, and the audience gasped as Siegfried, blinded by desire and illusion, pledged his love to the wrong swan. At that moment, the tragedy was sealed. The music plunged into sorrow, the stage washed in shadows. Odette's figure trembled at the betrayal, her wings drooping as though struck by an invisible blade. The swans around her folded into one another, their unity turning into a tableau of despair. Siegfried realized too late, his anguish bursting through his movements as he reached for her, trying to undo what was already bound in fate. His face, pale under the stage's glow, was not merely that of a dancer, but of a man carrying the weight of irreversible loss. The final act drew the audience into silence so profound it was as if the world itself had paused. The lake shimmered one last time, and Odette's form rose from the shadows, her arms trembling with both love and resignation. Siegfried ran to her, his movements a storm of desperation, but she shook her head, her eyes filled with a sorrow too deep to be conquered. The orchestra wept through its strings, every note a tear shed for the inevitability of their fate. Rothbart's shadow loomed large, triumph dripping from his every gesture, but Odette's decision shattered even his dominion. Instead of submitting to the curse, she chose freedom and death. She leaped into the lake, her body vanishing into the shimmering waters that had bound her. Siegfried, unable to bear the separation, followed her into the abyss, his leap one of both defiance and surrender. The orchestra surged, the brass and strings clashing in a tempest of grief and glory, and then softened into a mournful hymn. On stage, the swans collapsed, their feathers scattering like fallen petals, their curse lifted not by rescue, but by sacrifice. Rothbart's figure staggered, undone by the purity of their love and their refusal to be bound. His power crumbled, and he vanished into the shadows as the lake grew still. In the final tableau, the stage showed not despair, but transcendence. Above the lake, faint light bathed Odette and Siegfried, now free in death, their hands entwined as they rose beyond mortal suffering. The swans stood in reverent silence, their feathers glowing with a soft radiance as if blessed by the lovers' final act. The orchestra closed with a theme both sorrowful and serene, a reminder that beauty often comes at the cost of pain, and that love, though it cannot always conquer, can transform tragedy into eternal grace. When the curtain fell, the audience remained silent for a long moment, unable to break the spell. Many had come expecting a fairy tale of swans and princes, but what they witnessed was something far deeper, a reflection of the fragility of human hope, the cruelty of fate, and the haunting power of sacrifice. For Tchaikovsky, who poured his own anguish into every note, Swan Lake was not just a ballet but a confession of the soul, a mirror of his own struggles with love, identity, and despair. Each chord carried his voice, his yearning for freedom, and his mourning of what could never be. As the applause finally erupted, thundering through the hall, many in the crowd wept openly, their hearts pierced by the fusion of music and movement. They clapped not only for the dancers who had given their all, but for the unseen composer, whose pain had been transmuted into beauty eternal. The chandeliers flickered once more, casting their light on tear-streaked faces, and as the audience filed out into the night, the melody of Swan Lake lingered in their minds, a melody that would forever remind them of love, its fragile triumph, and the tragic story behind it.